Hey everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you are new. My name is Tonya, and in today's video we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of July. So go ahead, get comfortable, and let's start talking about some books. So for the month of July, I read 9 books. 6 were either ebook or physical books, and then 3 audiobooks. And I had done a summer TBR, so I picked out 12 prompts that I used for over June and July. And of those 12, even though I did hit the number of books I wanted to read, there were 2 books that I did not read. One of those was Children of Bone and Blood. That was more like a soft DNF. I think I will come back to that book at a later date, but I just wasn't kind of into it when I picked it up, so I decided not to try to push my way through it. I would just wait till I was in the mood. And then this month I DNF'd The Iron King. It wasn't a bad book, but it was a YA fantasy. And instead of reading more YA, I thought it read more middle grade. So the concept of the book and the writing wasn't bad overall, but it was just way too young for me. The female main character was 16, and like I said, it was just a little bit too young for me, so I gave it a good go. I read about 120 pages of it, and then I went ahead and put it down. So just keep that in mind if you do want to pick up that series. It does read a little young. And then on to the books that I read for this month. I did have 2 5-star reads that we're going to chit-chat about. And then I read 2,663 pages and listened to 38 hours and 5 minutes of audiobook. And that's a good chunk of audiobook for me. I am not someone who can listen to audiobooks on a higher speed. Makes me a little bit insane. I don't know how some people do it, but I just can't do it. It kind of takes me out of the book. So I do listen to them at normal speed. So sometimes it takes me a little while to get through them, but I had 3 this month, which is pretty good for me. So I think we'll go ahead and start with the audiobooks. I'm going to talk about these first 2 together because they are in the same series, and that was The Bridge Kingdom and The Traitor Queen. And that was The Bridge Kingdom and The Traitor Queen by Danielle Jensen. And the first book, The Bridge Kingdom, I gave a 3.75. Overall, pretty good, but there's a couple things in it that I didn't really care for. And then for the second book, Traitor Queen, I like that one a lot better, and I gave that one a 4-star. They were really easy to listen to, and if you have Audible, you should be able to listen to them without using a credit. At least I was able to, so that was also nice not to have to use any credits to listen to them. But if you're not familiar with the series, we're following Laura, who is a princess in a kingdom called Meridrina. And she has a quite horrible father who has basically taken her and all of her sisters and been training them to be spies and assassins in this desert oasis, kept them away from everyone, has been very cruel to them, all in the hopes of taking over a kingdom called Ithacana. And they, through another war 15 years previously, a treaty was drawn up where a princess of Meridrina would have to marry the king of Ithacana at some point, and they've gotten to the timeline of the treaty. So Laura ends up going off to marry this king who she's never met. She's only heard horrible things about him. She thinks he's been the cause of her people's suffering, that the king of Ithacana, Aaron, is the cause of all of her kingdom's suffering. The Ithacana has this bridge that they use that is basically lets them control a lot of the trade that happens throughout the kingdoms. And Laura's been brought up with this concept that since they control the bridge, then they've been doing all these horrible things to keep Meridrina, which is her country, from being able to purchase food and things like that. So she goes off to marry who she thinks is a terrible person. This is like an enemies to lovers kind of scenario. And once she gets there, she kind of learns that maybe her father wasn't as truthful as he should have been. But then in turn, she's, had all this training and all this brainwashing basically to raise her up that Ithacana was, the cause of all of her people's suffering. So she kind of has to get over that too. So that's the basic synopsis of these two books. And with the first book, like I said, I was a 3.75 on the Bridge Kingdom because the concept is great. I really enjoyed the characters, but the kind of part that I had a problem with was that Laura, even though she was being presented with all these facts, still seemed to want to hold on to what her father's teachings were, even though she in turn knew that he was a horrible, horrible person. But, she just kind of blindly followed these orders, which I guess could be a thing. You're brainwashed. That's kind of what happens. But I just, for me, I thought it was a little bit too on the naive side. But then I really, really enjoyed the second book, so would highly recommend. There's more book in these series, but they're like interconnected duologies. So these two books do finish out the story. You get the complete kind of tale of Laura and Aaron in the two books, and then it moves on to two different characters still in the same world. So like I said, they're pretty easy to listen to. They didn't cost me anything other than my normal Audible membership. So definitely would suggest picking them up if you have Audible. I've heard that when people read them, they really enjoy them as well. So it's a nice, easy kind of read and listen. So if you're looking for a romance like that, then I would recommend these books. Then next up, I listened to Rose in Chains, and this one was a surprise for me. I absolutely loved it. Now this is one where I would, from everything I've heard from other people, I would suggest the audiobook. The narrator does such a good job of conveying the different emotions that are happening in the book that it kind of allows you to be immersed in the story a little bit quicker than I think you would get by reading the book. What kind of makes this book unique is it's by Julie Soto, and she originally published this as a fan fiction. It was, based on Hermione and Draco from the Harry Potter world, but once it got picked up for traditional publishing, she obviously had to take all of that out, change the story some, and have it evolve into something new. So with that, the beginning of the book actually picks up where you're on the final battle of a war, which is a weird place to pick up the book because you don't know any of the backstory. And then she gives you that backstory through flashbacks as you read the book. But I think that when reading it, that makes it a little harder to be immersed into the world because you're just not getting all of that background you normally would have had if, say, we picked up the story prior to the war or, at the beginning of it or anything like that. You just kind of show up and you're at the final battle of a war. So that part was a little challenging, but as I said, by doing the audiobook and the narrator was so good, it allowed you to kind of just get into the feel of the book, feel all those emotions, start to care about the characters in a way that I don't know that you would get reading the physical book. Now that all being said, basically we're following Bryony, who is a princess in this land where in the final battle her side loses. So in Bryony's land they use mind magic, and in the opposing side, their enemy's land, they use heart magic, which seems a little weird. You would think like the heart magic would be the nice warm fuzzy people, but that is not the case. But Bryony's side, even with their powerful mind magic, they end up losing this battle. And everyone who is still alive at the end of this battle, who isn't killed as people are raiding and pillaging and doing all the horrible things that happen after a great battle, they take a whole bunch of people prisoner. And then they end up selling these prisoners off so that the people with the heart magic can use the mind magic people as kind of a siphon. So they're being sold into slavery so then that their magic can basically be torn from them and used by this other group of people. So it has a lot of kind of hard themes in it, especially that go along with the slavery and owning another person aspects of it. But there's even, additional topics in this that are kind of hard, things done to women that can happen with a war that, are just really hard to hear and read about. I'm starting to tear up now just thinking about it, but, I just thought that Julie Soto handled it really well and wrote it really well. And like I said, the narrator did a great job. And Bryony ends up being bought by Tovin, who is... sorry, I do have tears in my eyes. Who she went to school with, and they kind of had this romantic tension, even at the middle school, high school kind of age, but nothing ever came to it because, they were kind of on opposite sides, even at that point. Even though the heart mages and mind mages went to school together, they didn't get along, they weren't friends. But Bryony and Tovin just had this connection basically from the beginning. But Tovin ends up buying Bryony, and lots of kind of things come from there, and you learn lots of things about Tovin, about his family. This is definitely a slow burn romance. It has a lot of good banter, a lot of good tension. Once you get to the portion of the book where Bryony has actually been bought by Tovin, I think it picks up quite a bit and you become more engaged. When they're separated and you're just kind of getting the horrible backstory and what happens at the end of wars, then that part, it takes a little more time with. But then once they're together and you have that tension, then I think the book really picks up. So I won't go into any more detail than that, but definitely would recommend, and I would specifically recommend listening to this one as the audiobook. I gave it a 4.25 stars. There was some holes and misses, but I think a lot of that in this first book comes from the adaptation, from moving from the fan fiction to this traditionally published book. So I can give the author some grace with that because I think it was probably very hard to adapt. But hopefully moving forward, I think there's going to be 2 more books. Then the story should come together more and there shouldn't be as many gaps in it. So 4.25 stars, would recommend. And that was all for the audiobooks, and now we're going to move on to the physical and ebooks. So we're going to start with one of my 2 5-star reads, and that was The Book of Azrael by Amber Nicole. And this book destroyed me. I cried and cried and cried. The ending, devastating. I mean, there's no way. I don't know how anyone could read the ending and not either cry or at least be super moved. It was such a good book. The main female character, Diana, she is unapologetically fierce. I absolutely loved her. This is an urban fantasy, and Diana started off as a mortal, and then she was turned into something that's considered a monster called an Igmorthium. I may not be pronouncing that right. There's a couple of pronunciations that were hard in this book, but basically, it's a monster that she can shapeshift, she can shoot fire, if she drinks people's blood, she can see their memories. So she's super powerful and she's a super badass. But basically she was made into this Igmorthium by someone named Caden, who is also an Igmorthium. But her sister was dying and she just called out to anyone who could help to save her sister, kind of up to the heavens, and this is kind of what she got stuck with. So Caden ended up saving her sister, but in turn, because he saw something in Diana that he wanted, so he in turn said he would only save her sister if she agreed to be turned as well. And Diana's heart is expansive and she agreed. And then, now she's almost immortal. She can be killed, but it's very difficult. So now she and her sister have been alive for 1,000 years. Caden's basically keeping them hostage he keeps Diana on a leash and asks her to do terrible things, because if she doesn't, he said he will kill her sister. So, or not let her see her sister, or all these things just to keep them separated, because he knows Diana would do anything for Gabby, which is her sister. So she's kind of on the evil side of the world. And then our male main character is Sam Kyle. He starts off being known as Liam at the beginning of the book, but his real name is Sam Kyle. And he is basically a god. He is like one of the last gods. All the older gods have been killed. And he has basically put himself into exile for hundreds and hundreds of years because he had to destroy his homeland. And as you can imagine, this was a tough thing for him to deal with. You know, you destroyed your homeland. It's devastated now. Lots of people and gods were killed. So he put himself into this exile, and he's become very withdrawn and unemotional. But something happens where he has to go back down to Onona, probably pronouncing that wrong as well. And there he ends up running into Diana, and they have an instant connection. The banter is great. They end up, because Diana gets captured, working together to try to find this book of Azrael, and then things kind of ensue from there. And then, as I said, the ending, devastating, but I was here for it. I actually just finished the second book in the series, loved it as well, but I'll talk about that in my wrap up for August. But highly recommend if you like urban fantasy, if you like fierce heroines and heroes who love hard and give it their all, this will be a series that you will love. And then next we're going to talk about one that was actually pretty disappointing for me, and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And I had really high hopes for this book. I'm still kind of back and forth. I've said 3, I've said 3.5. I'm still not 100% sure where I'm going to land with this book, only that I was really disappointed in it because I had really high hopes. And it starts off with this kind of whimsical feel. Tress lives in a world where the seas are not really made up of water. They're made up of spores that have fallen from the different moons that are above her world. And these spores can be quite dangerous. So the island that Tress lives on in the Emerald Sea is basically, once you're on there, you're not allowed to leave. They don't want you to like contaminate the rest of the world. So if you're born there, you're gonna stay there, and this is just where you live. They don't get a lot of visitors. So she hasn't been exposed to much in the world, but she kind of has an amazing outlook on life and has this really sweet relationship with the Duke's son, Charlie. The Duke is an asshole. Charlie is not. But they've become friends over the years, and Tress collects cups that she gets from either, just washing up on the island, or sometimes sailors have brought them in. And she collects these cups as a way to see the world. And then she'll go, and her and Charlie will talk about her different finds with the cups. Sometimes he'll tell her a story about them, or sometimes she has something to say about them. But they just have this really sweet relationship. And as they get around like age 18, they start to realize they have feelings for each other. And the Duke is not about that. The Duke, who is allowed to leave the island, he's the one person on the island that can leave, decides that it's time to take Charlie out in the world to get him away from Tress and find him a proper bride. And of course, Tress is devastated by this, but Charlie goes off with his father, and that's kind of where we get into the meat of the story. And like I said, I really had high hopes for this when I started reading it. I was so touched by the whimsy that was in the book, and it had a very like Princess Bride feel. But then there was just some things that kind of took me out of the story and just basically ruined it for me. And the first of those being Tress decides to go after Charlie at one point in the book. So she has to go out and sail on the different seas to try to reach him. And while she's out looking for Charlie, the ship that she's on, there's someone named Hoyd on it. And all of the characters in the book are very unique, very kind of off-kilter. They all have quirks. But Hoyd in particular has been cursed by a sorceress, so he's not really super in his right mind. But for whatever reason, Brandon Sanderson, and I'm sure he had a reason, but he decides this person is going to be the narrator. And this book did not need a narrator. From my understanding, this Hoyd character kind of shows up in all of Brandon Sanderson's books that are in the Cosmere. But I just thought it was an element that really took you out of the book. The narration wasn't needed. It broke the story. And that was one of the main reasons I didn't really enjoy the book as much as I could. The second reason is there was a lot of like juvenile kind of humor. And, you know, things can be silly. I do like whimsy and humor in a book, but there was like bathroom humor. I don't need to hear about bathroom humor. I am way past that stage in my life. And even though this, I think technically is considered a YA book, I felt like it was super young even for a YA book. So didn't enjoy that part of it. And then that along with the narrator experience, it just kind of took the book down a lot for me. And I don't know that I would be willing to read another Brandon Sanderson book. So he may just not be the writer for me. I haven't decided yet completely if I'm going to give up on him or if I am going to try some of his adult fantasy books. But yeah, I must say I was highly disappointed, and I don't know that I would recommend this book. I mean, maybe middle grade, maybe. But I think that a lot of adult readers would have problems with this book. And then next, let's talk about, it's behind me somewhere, my favorite read of the month, which was my second 5-star, 3 Shattered Souls by Maya Corland, and I have loved this entire series. The first book in the series, Broken Blade, 5-star read for me. Second, I was probably at like a 4.5, 4.75. Still absolutely loved it. This one, absolutely amazing. I would recommend this series to anyone. It is so fast-paced, and just as the name says, it is soul-shattering. Like the ending of this book and some of the things our characters went through was just so hard. It's just an absolutely amazing read. The storytelling is great. Our characters go through so much, not only just in the emotional and physical things they go through, but in their growth as characters. Just an amazing reading experience through all of the books. And the kind of general synopsis is, in the first book, we start out following 5 essentially morally gray characters. We have a thief, we have an exiled prince, we have a spy master, a poison mistress, and a strong man. And they are all, as you can kind of tell by what their skills are, they're all kind of questionable backgrounds and are definitely on that morally gray scale. And they've been given this task separately at first, but then they do all come together to kill off the current God King, who is not a great ruler. He's done terrible things to his people, and he's made a lot of enemies. But these 5 individuals are brought together to kind of take him down. And you get all of the 5 individuals' POVs in the books. The chapters are really short and it moves super quick. It's almost told in real time because you're getting the points of views just switching back and forth. And I really enjoyed that. Throughout the series, my favorite characters were Ari and Royo. I love them all, but those were my 2 favorites just because Ari has this whimsical, wonderful outlook on life, even though she's had to turn to thievery to kind of support herself and get through things. She just has this joy about her and this innocence that, you just can't help love. And she probably goes through the most growth as a character throughout the book. And yeah, definitely my favorite. This is technically a fantasy book, but there's not a lot of magical elements in it until you get to kind of the third book. And the magic that is in here is all like relic magic. So, you know, there's these items that have been given basically godly powers of different natures that the rulers have. And that's where the magic kind of in the land comes from. So not like your typical high fantasy, but there is magics in the book. It's more of, I would say, like a political fantasy. Definitely has some darker moments as well, but very, very good and would highly recommend. And then for our next book, we're going to talk about Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. But before we do that, just so you know, if you do hear any like breathing or snoring, Luna is laying on the bed up here and her head is basically right by the microphone. So I don't know how much of that is going to pick up on camera. But if you do hear that, just know that is not me. That is Luna sleeping sweetly on the bed. But back to Sunrise on the Reaping. I don't think I really need to tell you what this book is about. Most people have heard of the Hunger Games, so this is another prequel to it. If you haven't heard of the books, you've probably at least heard of the movies. And in this one, we're following Haymitch's story. So you go into the book knowing that devastating things are going to happen, just based on, you know, we already know what the outcome of Haymitch's story is if you've seen the Hunger Games movies or if you've read the books. So I went into this book just knowing there was going to be some devastating moments, and there definitely was. You get a greater appreciation though for Haymitch and kind of where he came from and how he ended up like he was when we see him, when Katniss first meets him. It's just, I can't imagine going through some of the things that he went through and then continuing to survive. It was everything that I hoped it would be. I gave it a 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star read for me, and I don't know if that is because I did know what the outcome for a lot of things were going to be. So it was just that little step below a 5-star. But definitely, if you like the Hunger Games, read this one. Know you're going to be devastated at parts, but Suzanne Collins tells stories great, writes great characters. And even though I wouldn't say that she's necessarily like a master at banter, she's a master at storytelling. So the characters, the world building, all of that comes together with the plot pretty seamlessly, in my opinion. If you're a Hunger Games fan, definitely pick it up. We'll see how it compares to the movie when it comes out, but it was a great read. I knew it was going to be, and yeah, definitely enjoyed it. The next up, I read Spellbound, Scones, and Secrets by Tonya Kappas, and this was a really short little read. It's a cozy fantasy, and I basically picked it up because I knew I needed something light and warm and fuzzy after I finished Sunrise on the Reaping. You know, I needed a little bit of an emotional break. And in this book, we're following a character named Low Heel Park, and she lives in a spiritualist community called Whispering Falls with her parents, where everyone has some sort of magical power, whether that is, you know, they can do magic, they can read minds, there's some sort of mysticism to everyone who lives there. But for Lo, magic seems to have skipped a generation and she has no powers, so she knows that at some point they are going to force her to move out of the town, and she is good with that. She has this dream of living among the mortals in a normal human city and becoming a great baker. So it ends up that, you know, council decides that it's time for Lo to go ahead and move out rather controllingly, telling her that she's going to move to some place called Celestial Falls. It's kind of like a, you know, trial basis of being on her own and seeing how she does in the mortal world. Well, she opens a bakery there. A friend of hers named Oren from Whispering Falls ends up following her because he doesn't want to live in this boring town either where they've been living. He wants to follow her and have some adventures out in the mortal world. So they're basically, you know, getting the bakery set up in this small town. Things kind of move from there. Now, overall, not much plot. I mean, this book was under 200 pages, so super short. The concept of it was cute. I don't know that the execution was that great. There was times that, because I think both Lo and Oren were like mid-20s to 30 years old. So, I mean, they were adults, but they came off as super immature. Like almost some things they would do, I would equate to like a temper tantrum that you might see from like a teenager or something like that. So they came off as kind of immature. So I didn't really enjoy that aspect of the book. And I think it almost could have been a little longer since it was under 200 pages. I mean, we couldn't spend much time on everything. You know, it had to kind of keep moving to get to the end of the story. And I do believe there's a second book in the series, so I don't know why they wouldn't have just combined it into one book and kind of given you a bigger picture of what was going on in this particular town. It was fine. I gave it a 3-star. If you're needing kind of a mindless read, then I would suggest reading it. But otherwise, I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend picking up this book. It is on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have a unlimited membership, then you know you're not losing anything by reading it. But I mean, it's not something that I'm probably gonna pick up the second book or read anything else by this author. Then the final book that I read was North is the Night by Emily Rath. And first off, I did not know how beautiful this book was, so let me show you. So I knew that it had these pretty sprayed edges, but look at the cover. Do you see that shimmery there? I had no idea that I had bought such a beautiful book. And then the inside, that's the front pages, front end pages, end to end pages, whatever you want to call it. And that's kind of the back, but absolutely beautiful book. And it does also have like the reversible dust jacket. So that was a pleasant surprise to see what a beautiful book I had bought. And then the other pleasant surprise was the book itself. So in this book, we are following Siri and Anya, and they are childhood best friends. They are now adults, and Anya ends up being taken by some of the gods of the underworld, and Siri cannot let that happen. Siri is going to do whatever she can do to get her friend back. And Emily Rath does such a great job of portraying these two characters because they're kind of opposites in many ways. This is based on Finnish folklore, so there's a lot of those folkloric kind of elements in it with the different gods, and her description of the different gods and kind of their powers and their interactions is really good. I enjoyed all of those kind of folkloric elements of it. But then she also does a great job of helping us get to know Siri and Anya and their different strengths. Siri is very fearless. She is fierce by nature. She will always go out of her way to step up, not let people that she cares about be harmed, put in her 2 cents, not follow the standard, quiet woman role that is prevalent kind of at the time period when this book was written. She's just a very strong, outgoing, fierce kind of character. And then Anya, her best friend, in turn has this soft fierceness to her. She is not one who would speak up in a crowd or anything like that, but she has this quiet power about her, just in the way that she cares about people and the actions she takes to keep those that she cares about safe. And another kind of interesting element of this book is Christianity and the way it was trying to be pushed onto the Finnish people and how it was represented in this book. I just found really interesting. I do kind of like those religious discussions sometimes in books, and I thought it was really well done in here and kind of an interesting take to include in the story. But basically, after Anya is taken by some of the underworld gods down to Tunula, which is the Finnish underworld, Ciri decides that she has to go get her back because no one is stealing her Anya from her. So she goes out in search of the shaman who, it is said, made it into Tunula and back out alive. And she needs his help to figure out how he got into the underworld and made it back out so that she can in turn rescue Anya. Now, while Ciri's on her journey, Anya is stuck in the underworld. Lots of horrible things are happening, but we see her story as well as, you know, kind of how she's surviving down there, what she has to do to survive, and getting to know more of the kind of dark creatures and gods that do live in the underworld, and why some young girls are being taken. So there's lots of different kind of underlying plot lines and lots of different characters, but really enjoyed the writing. Would highly suggest this book. I gave it a 4.25. There is a sapphic element to it that I was completely not expecting. I wasn't aware that this book had anything sapphic in it. I thought that portion was really well done, and it was kind of woven into the book in an interesting way. So really enjoyed that. But there is a second book that is going to be coming out in this series, and I will definitely be picking it up. Yeah, this book just was a really nice surprise and kind of out of the realm of what I usually read. I don't read a ton of like folkloric kind of books, but so really enjoyed that as well. I think, you know, sometimes it's just nice to kind of change up what you're reading. You don't always have to read the same genre or the same authors, but I've been this year exploring a lot of different authors, and I think it's done a lot for my reading and my enjoyment of reading, just like kind of dabbling around and trying different things. So highly recommend this book. Also highly recommend just switching up what types of book you're reading and what authors you're reading, just to change up that reading experience. So that is everything that I read in the month of July. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the various books that I read. If you have read any of them, let me know what your thoughts were down below. And also let me know what your favorite book was that you read in the month of July. And that can help kind of give some ideas to everyone of books they may want to pick up. So yeah, that'll be it for today's video. Take care, keep reading, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.